I hate to break it to you, but you're in for a big surprise. 5 years from now, Jane, who's resigning today, will ring the NASDAQ bell, officially launching her company on the public market. And what you'll soon realize is that Jane stole your most valuable data to start her new company on her way out the door. Learn how Code 42 Insider can stop data theft and protect your organization's most valuable assets. Visit code42.com to learn more.
This year, American Education Week runs from November 15th through the 19th. This all began with Warren G. Harding, the head of ND United, which is the group. Actually, Nick Archuleta has been the president of North Dakota United. That's the group of individuals that get together and talk about issues like this. Teachers, public works, those type of folks. But what better group to talk to during Education Week than somebody who represents teachers? Nick, good to have you back on News and Views.
It's great to be back, Joel.
Describe to people the history of American Education Week and how this all came about.
Well, it all came about years ago, and I mean years and years ago, like 100. We noticed there was a concern in the United States that the young men that we had sent off to fight our country's wars in World War I lacked some very basic skills in reading and writing and mathematics. So the American Legion and the National Education Association put their heads together and came out with some ideas, and one of them was to promote education, because they knew right away that if this country was going to be a leader in the world, it would have to be an educated country. And so from those humble beginnings, American Education Week was born, and we were very happy for it.
You know, I was thinking about this yesterday, knowing that I was going to get a chance to visit with you when the infrastructure bill got signed, because we're talking about roads and bridges and water and sewer and all the things that I've been pounding on for years, and now making sure that broadband is one of the terms that's used in all of that. But one of the biggest pieces of infrastructure to make this country compete on a world scale is education. It is. It's a big part of it.
You're absolutely right. Yep, and you'll remember, Joel, back when the oil boom started in North Dakota, we, as a state, hurried to make sure that we had the infrastructure to hustle up and make sure that we could get that oil to market. So we improved highways out in the west. The infrastructure of pipelines was put in so that we could safely and efficiently move that product around. And that's exactly what was needed at the time. What we need now in this country and in our state, of course, is an investment in our intellectual infrastructure. And I think by raising education up is a perfect way to do that, and American Education Week is what that's all about.
You know, oftentimes when we speak about education, Nick, it's with a goal. It's with, hey, we can do better. We could do this. You know, let's put some money here. Let's put some money there. Let's get better. You know, it's always with a goal that makes it sound like the complete education system is failing. Well, I'm going to ask you this. What are we doing right in public education? What are we doing that we don't talk about enough?
Well, what we don't talk enough about is the utter commitment and dedication of teachers across the state of North Dakota, and not just teachers, but education support professionals who, if you've ever been in a school, and I know you have, these are the people that really make things tick. I mean, they are the ones that transport our kids. They're the ones that feed our kids. They're the ones that keep meticulous records and basically do all this work that supports teachers in their good work of educating our students. What we don't do well enough in this state is acknowledge that fact and celebrate that fact. I would put our education system up against any states in the nation, to be quite honest with you. I believe in our teachers that much. So we don't talk enough about that. We do talk, I think, entirely too much about real or imagined shortcomings in our education system.
Well, and I think that people don't understand it anymore. Once you're done, you're done. I mean, certainly there are active parents out there that go to parent-teacher conferences, that know the teachers, that have a good conversation about curriculum and everything else that comes with it. But for many people, once that chapter of their life is over, it's over. And so you just mentioned, hey, been in classrooms type. I'm not convinced that people who did quite well at school would understand what's even going on in school today. that it's evolved, you know?
It has evolved, and it should evolve. I mean, the education that was required of our grandparents pales in comparison to what is required of our students today, as we're educating them for jobs that don't even exist yet. And so I think that's an important fact to keep in mind. You know, Senator Nicole Pullman, who's leaving the Senate now, she about a couple of sessions ago, she was testifying, and she said something that I've always remembered, and that was, if you haven't been in a school classroom in the last 5 years, you haven't been in a school. And I think that reflects the changes that have gone on in education and in our schools across North Dakota.
Well, I think that's the truth. I mean, whenever I go in and sit in on a class or get a chance to speak to a class, I always like to hang out and watch the process, watch what's going on. And the product that they're turning out, which is an intelligent new generation, is in so many ways such a key to this country's future. And that is where an investment needs to be made. And it can't all be done in dollars. I get that, Nick, but you know, we're losing teachers, and we're losing people that want to teach. How do we fix that?
Well, I think the most important thing we can do is to respect teachers, offer them the respect that they receive in other countries. You know, there's the international tests that are taken every year or so. Those highest performing countries, they really do value educators, just like they value doctors, just like they value psychiatrists, just like they value lawyers, and they treat that profession at that with that high esteem. That's something we could do more of. Not only are we losing teachers, we're seeing some potentially very good teachers not choose education as a profession, and that's going to have long-term consequences down the road if we cannot get enough really high-quality folks to enter the teaching profession. That does not bode well for our future. So anything that we can be doing to make sure that we get highly effective people into the profession, we're all for that.
So grade us. I mean, you're a teacher, you're an educator, your wife is an educator, you work around educators all your life. When it comes to North Dakotas now, I'm talking about North Dakota, a lot of people listening to you in Montana, South Dakota, Minnesota, but you represent ND United. Grade how our public school system is.
I would give our public school system for the work that the teachers do, that the education support professionals put into it. We have administrators that are trusted across the state and by the people who hired them, and school boards. I mean, they all rank very highly with North Dakota's population. So I would give us a solid A-.
Okay. Nick, can you hang on for just a little bit longer? A couple more questions for you. He hung in there with us, Nick Archuleta, president of ND United, representing teachers and getting out there talking in this, it's Education Week is what it is. And so American Education Week is a good time to take a step back and just have a conversation about where we're going. Nick, we talked about, whether or not we're going to have the teachers to do what we do. And you mentioned that the key is to be respecting them. I have to ask you about this whole debate the country's having on critical race theory. When I hear that, and I hear the generic form of what people want it to be defined as, I think of lack of respect of that educator that's in the classroom. And I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, Joel, here's the thing about critical race theory. It has been around since the 1970s. And up until, 6 months ago, you never heard about it. Nobody heard about it because it was something that was confined to institutions of higher education, particularly law schools. And but it became one of those culture war touchstones, I'm sorry to say, when some folks said that it's being taught in high schools and even in middle schools in the United States. I can tell you that it is not being taught in high schools, and certainly not in North Dakota. And I've had these conversations with leaders from across the country, and they find it patently ridiculous to assume that critical race theory is being taught in their schools. In North Dakota, Joel, and I think most people, if they were just to stop, take a deep breath, they'll understand this, that North Dakota teachers teach to standards that were developed by North Dakota teachers for North Dakota students and are overseen by locally elected school boards. If there is critical race theory being taught in those schools, believe me, somebody would know it. And even throughout this debate at the special session of the legislature, I didn't hear anybody say, in this particular school, this critical race theory component is being taught. Not once.
So let me ask you this, Nick. If it's not being taught, then what's the problem with making sure it's not being taught?
I don't have any problem with it. I mean, the legislation that went through, I mean, it still leaves it up to local authorities to, to dictate what their curriculum is going to be. So basically, I guess my only issue with it was that this is a policy matter, and policy matters should be heard in regular sessions of the legislature and go before committees that deal with those, like the Senate Education Committee or the House Education Committee, that deal with policy matters. During taking this up in this special session, frankly, I didn't think it was the right thing to do, but I don't think it's going to change what North Dakota teachers or school districts are doing.
Well, and I read a message earlier from an individual who wanted the question answered of whether or not they talked about the Dred Scott ruling or basically where America was pre-Civil War, post-Civil War, whether or not teaching that now put them in violation of Jim Casper's law.
Well, I guess that'll be up to their local school board. Frankly, I don't think that meets the definition of of critical race theory. Keep in mind that what a lot of people believe that critical race theory is probably an error. And we know this because there was a gentleman by the name of Christopher Rufo who's basically turned critical race theory into a lucrative side hustle. And he was the guy that was on a television show that former President Trump heard and then kind of elevated this guy's theory to something actionable. And basically what he has said, and then he tweeted this out, he said, "We will turn it toxic," talking about CRT, "as we put all the various cultural insanities under that brand category." And then he went on to say that the goal is to have the public read something negative in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory.
Well,
I mean, that's from the horse's mouth.
If that was their goal, I would argue they achieved it.
Yep.
I mean,
they sure did.
And I said earlier when I was visiting with Steven Sawchuk, the associate editor for Education Week, because, my theory, and it's actually fact on what's happening, isn't about education. This is about votes. This is about demagoguing. This is about saying something's happening that isn't happening, that gets a certain side all fired up so that now they have to get active on something that they didn't need to get active on at all.
Well, I agree. And that's politics. And we understand there's going to be some of that goes on, because they're politicians. So we understand that. But in terms of this being something that's going to change the course of education in North Dakota, it will not, because we don't teach critical race theory now. I don't know if anybody was planning on it. What we do teach, though, Joel, is the truth. And nobody should be against teaching the truth in North Dakota's schools or in any school.
Yeah. I mean, and as far as I'm concerned, what we have been discussing is something that's an upper level course if you're going to have that discussion. But I'd be doggone if my seventh grade child or grandchild couldn't have a conversation at some level about race in the classroom. I don't know what classroom you'd want him in if he can't even have a discussion about that, Nick. And that's my problem.
Well, you're exactly right. And here's the thing about that is that we can still talk about race. It's part of our history. I believe in American exceptionalism. I think we are an exceptional country, Joel. But part of the reasons that I think that we're exceptional is the fact that we can look objectively at our past. We know that we haven't been perfect as a nation, but we are on a mission that was laid out for us to form a more perfect union. And in order to form that more perfect union, Joel, I think we need to take a look at America's history and decide, boy, we sure did this great, and we did a lot of things great, and we do a lot of things that are great, that lead the world. But we also have a few things in our past that we should also learn from.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's just like a human being.
Yep.
You look back at your life, you take into account the mistakes you've made.
Sure.
I do the same thing.
Yep.
And I think that's what helps us to grow as human beings. That's also what's going to help us grow as a nation.
Keep doing what you're doing.